right. Welcome everyone to the first Fileread user webinar. I'm very excited to host today's conversation, talk about generative AI, how it's being used in legal workflows, and specifically what our users are doing with Fileread's relativity application. We're joined by two fantastic Fileread users who've been early adopters of the technology, Anna Kovaleska from Field's Han Cunniff, and Kate Janson Johns, the Manager of Knowledge and Practice Support Services at Nutter. Thanks for being here, guys. Now let's start by getting to know you both a bit better. So Anna, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your role at Field's Han Cunniff and the kind of litigation work you do?
Sure. I'm a mid-level associate at Han Cunniff, and we represent state attorneys general, tribal nations, and other public clients in high-impact civil litigation. And as a plaintiff's firm, we don't bill by the hour. So for us, as a small shop of six lawyers, we're constantly thinking, how do we punch above our weight? How do we level the playing field when we're up against corporate defendants? And we've partnered with large firms to outsource the discovery burden, but we're increasingly bringing the work in-house. So for us, the key question always is, how do we deliver the same caliber of work with greater efficiency and less manpower? And in terms of my role, I do a mix of legal research, briefing, and discovery strategy across areas including public health, antitrust, and consumer protection. And my work centers on building factual records to support our theories. I also help manage document review workflows and integrate tools like Fileread to make us more efficient and litigation ready.
Thanks, Anna. And Kate, what about you? What does your role at Nutter look like, especially around lit support?
I have been at the firm for a long time, starting off in the library, and then I've been in litigation for over a decade. And we're a Boston-based firm of about 150 attorneys. We have about 40 in litigation, and we insource almost the majority of our e-discovery work. We have Relativity One in-house, and we've been happy with that solution. And we're kind of the opposite end, which will this will be a good conversation. We have a lot of technology. I think we're a little constrained by the billable hour industry that we kind of have no choice but to abide to. But we do try to work very efficiently because we've invested in a lot of technology and we keep e-discovery as much as we can in-house. So we want to make sure that we're getting a good return on investment from all of that technology. So a lot of my job is advocating for all of these tools, making sure our attorneys are comfortable using them. And yeah, so that's most of what I do in lit support.
Thanks. Now, what initially drew you to Fileread, Kate? What problem were you hoping to solve?
Well, so we transitioned to Relativity One in mid 2018, and it was a big jump for us because we had never had Relativity on-prem, so it was a jump to their cloud-based offering, and it took a little bit to kind of get our sea legs and understand how to use the application. And by the time we were in a good place, it was the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and we all know what happened in the beginning of 2020. So after about another year, 2021-ish, I wanted to focus on how do we make the relativity experience better and bring in more efficiencies, more third-party apps to help our attorneys work more efficiently. So the one thing that I wanted to do was have a Google type application to help our attorneys search. Relativity does have some conceptual analytics tools, but we never had good luck with them. So I just wanted to have a Google type experience. And so I went to the Relativity apps website and I found Fileread and I reached out to Chan and I've been working with his team ever since. And I will say that we were using Fileread before ChatGPT became a thing. And so I can talk a little more later about what the transition has been for us using Fileread pre-Gen AI and post-Gen AI. But it really was to provide a Google-like search experience for the attorneys that was simpler than DT search or Boolean searching or all of that.
Yeah, you definitely were an early adopter. Now it's all the rage to find a ChatGPT or large language model tool. Let's talk about how it fits into your daily work. So, Anna, can you walk us through a typical litigation task when you're using Fileread?
Yeah, so I had one assignment that I can talk about where I had to identify pharmacies for a request for production, and I knew the pharmacies' names and addresses, but that was it. And when I plugged those names into Fileread into our document set one at a time, I was able to instantly get not just the documents associated with those pharmacies, but also little bits of information that then helped me search more. So I was getting things like DEA numbers, alternate names for the pharmacies, misspellings of the pharmacies. Sometimes they do business under another name and the name of the business owner and so on. So in a short time period, I'm able to collect a much more robust set of data and sort of get to the facts quicker. And that's been a game changer for us.
Awesome. Let's go back to what you were talking about, Kate. You found FileRead. You were looking for a Google-like search tool. What was the rollout like internally? Was the adoption smooth, not so smooth?
Well, it took a little bit in the beginning. Remember, pre-ChatGPT, pre-Gen AI, the app worked. We just needed to get the right case team to start using it. So that took a little bit. And then as soon as we did start using it, it was November 2022 and ChatGPT came around. And that changed everything. And FileRead was on top of Gen AI before we even were as a firm. And so we kind of had to pause our adoption to make sure that the firm was comfortable with the technology. It took a little bit of time, but it was kind of cool that we had an app that already used this technology that everyone was talking about. Now we've really benefited from really everyone understanding AI somehow. I mean, partners would never come up and talk to me about technology assisted review or predictive coding or any of that. But now they're asking all sorts of questions about how do we use Gen AI in how we do our work. So the level of education is much broader because we're talking about it in our non-work lives as well. So that's definitely helping with the adoption. And I am telling people, are you using Gen AI in your non-work life too, or non-legal work? Are you using Copilot or are you using ChatGPT for non-work related things? Because that's how you understand how to use FileRead more.
You mentioned TAR and predictive coding, so I'm just going to go straight into this. I understand you're using AIR and FileRead, and I get a ton of questions about how to use these two together. In fact, there are some attendees here where I said, you should come listen to Kate talk about it on the user webinar. She'll speak to this. Do you mind telling us a little bit about how you utilize FileRead and AIR together in workflows at the firm?
Yeah, so my idea is to have this sandwich approach to reviewing documents where we start with FileRead, we then go to AIR for review, and then we finish it up with FileRead. And I do, just to step back for a second, I think there's definitely room for both tools here because Relativity's AI strategy has been from the bottom up, developing software for discrete tasks like doc review, privilege review, all those types of things, whereas FileRead is the top down where let's just put this application on your entire workspace and then you as the user control what you need, the kind of questions you're asking for. So there's definitely room for both applications in our doc review workflow. So what we've been doing is we start with FileRead and the attorneys go in and they're just kind of interrogating their documents. They're trying to figure out what's there without spending a lot of time doing it, which is the whole point of AI, right? And then that's helping them develop the prompt for AIR for review, which is where we can determine some predictions, what's predicted to be responsive or not responsive or issue coding. And then once we go through that whole relativity, AIR for review process, when we have our buckets of documents, we're turning back to FileRead to say, okay, here are the predicted responsive documents. Generate a fact memo that's summarizing or telling us what's in here. Here are some non-responsive documents. Do the same thing. And the idea is that an associate starting their review will have some kind of summary about what's in the documents and can just prioritize what they're reviewing in a little more mindful way than just jumping in, starting at document 1 and ending with document 6,000. So That's the idea. And I will say that there's two different pricing structures for relativity and file read. The pricing structure for file read has allowed us to do this and has been flexible enough that we have been able to experiment and really integrate file read easily into our AI workflow.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. And as I mentioned, there are people here who had questions about that, but if we didn't cover everything, there is Q&A functionality in the webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to just ask as we go along. So we talked about rolling it out at a firm-wide level, but Anna, let me turn to you and ask about rolling out Fileread at individual level. How did you get comfortable using it? Have you onboarded others? Can you talk a little bit about your personal onboarding use of Fileread?
Yeah, so we're a small firm and we're super lucky in that we have partners that are 100% on board. Even if they're not familiar with the technology, they really want to be a part of it. We want it to be a part of our business model. So as we're talking about how file read works and the uses for it, and like my wheels are spinning about what you had mentioned, Kate, about generating the fax memo. That's a really cool idea. I haven't thought of that. Um, so it's been an interesting journey because you don't know how well the product works until you use it and you have an application for it, and then you show your colleagues and your superiors like, hey, this thing actually works, and it's helping us a lot. So in terms of rollout, it winds up being kind of slower than just the sort of initial demonstration, because typically what happens is we'll get like I was working on a task the other day, like a ton of deposition transcripts, around 20 to 25. And I had to very quickly figure out the employment ranges for the people in those transcripts. And so I was able to do that fairly quickly with generative AI. And I explained that to my colleagues, and they think that now they're starting to understand, like, oh, you could complete this task in what would ordinarily take you a day, you could complete in a very short time period. This is really useful. So to answer your question about rollout, I think it's something that's sort of a moving target all the time because we still don't know exactly which tasks line up neatly with Fileread's use. But as we go, we experiment and we learn, which is really great.
That's interesting. I had a question for you, which was, what challenges or hesitations did you face with Gen AI,
Yeah.
personally or with the firm? But maybe you've got the partner support and there hasn't been as much as I might expect.
Well, the challenges for me personally have been accuracy.
Mm.
With ChatGPT, less so of a concern with Fileread because it's citing to things that are within my document set. The way that I like to think about generative AI is that it's almost like an intern or an assistant that's very new, that's taking a first stab at a project and helping do a lot of the legwork. But at the end of the day, as an attorney, you have the obligation to verify the work that's being generated and to identify it as accurate. I don't think that challenge is ever going to go away, but I do think that over time, as the language models improve, it's just going to get much, much easier to identify whether something's accurate, where it's coming from, and how do we use it.
Kate, how do you guys deal with accuracy issues or verifying the accuracy of the output of file read? I know it's got the citations engine, it cites to the documents, but any thoughts or processes you've put in place at your firm?
Well, that really has been the biggest thing, the fact that the analysis will cite right to the document in relativity. And one thing that we did before attorneys started going in and using it themselves is we would ask questions, the lit support team would ask questions, and then we would just create a saved search of the documents that are used to answer the question in Fileread. So it still is up to the attorneys to look through the documents and to make the judgment call if this is accurate, or maybe it's accurate, but it's not something you need. Like maybe the AI is working correctly, but you don't need it for whatever reason. But it is so much of our training overall at the firm is really about how you as the attorney still need to be present and to make decisions. This is not doing work for you. It's just hopefully surfacing information quicker. And the reality is there's just so much data now. I mean, we all know this. relentless and it's not going away, and our brains are not really getting any bigger. We're not increasing the amount of associates we have to weed through all this data. We have to do something to keep this business afloat and keep doing our work, and we really have to turn to these AI tools, I think, to manage this data. And there's just personal responsibility. You have to make sure that the output you're getting is accurate, and having the citations makes that very simple in Fileread.
I wonder if that's what's helped made it stick at Nutter. Yeah, I went to a conference years ago, an ARC conference in Chicago, and the entire theme of the conference was buying technology and then firms not actually using it. Like this is a problem with legal tech, as many of us know, but you've got good usage of FileRead. What do you think's made it stick, or how have you managed to make sure that it's actually used at the firm?
Well, something that, and I think you alluded to earlier, like we can bring them to the water, but we can't make them drink. So how do we make the infrastructure easy so people can find Fileread, start to use it? Because I can only navigate people to the app as much as I can. And then attorneys actually have to get in there and start asking questions and start working on it themselves. And I found that once they do that, they like it, and they are seeing the utility, and they are starting to use it. So my idea, and I do this with everything in relativity, is just being kind of passive aggressive and putting it somewhere where it's easy for attorneys to stumble upon or to see, and then that's when they start using it. They don't necessarily have to sit in on a training with me and remember how to use it. They can just see that there's a tab up there. Their second tab, whenever they go into any workspace, is going to be Fileread. And you're probably not going to like this, but maybe we call it something different. Maybe we call it AI, the tab AI assisted searching, and ChatGPT for relativity.
I don't
I
mind at
won't
all.
say
Whatever
that.
gets people using it works for me.
But
So
like
it's
it's
cool to
up,
hear that.
it's in their face. It's, right there for them to use. So just having the user experience be easy for attorneys to access these technologies and play around on their own, I think that's how it's been successful.
Interesting. Now, again, bring it back to the individual level. Anna, you are definitely what I would call a power user. What's made it indispensable for you? Is it's something about the functionality, the features?
I like that when I ask it a question, it gives a very simple language answer. It gives an answer in simple language and it gives me bullet points. So it doesn't inundate me with information. It gives me just enough to be curious and to, click through the citations and get to the underlying documents. And it also gives me a little bit of extra information where I might want to ask more follow-up questions. Where otherwise, if I did the same search via the standard search function in relativity, I would have those same questions and thoughts, but I wouldn't be writing them down. I would just be thinking about them as I flip through a series of documents. And so doing it this way, it just helps me think better, if that makes sense. And sometimes Fileread does a thing where, if I'm looking for a document and I misspell something or I write the wrong date, I've had instances where a Fileread says, "Did you mean this day?" I'm like, "Oh, actually, you're right. I did mess that up. Thank you, Fileread." So it's helpful in that sense.
Yeah, someone said to me, and maybe it was one of you, but I don't know if I was just on a call with a user, and they're saying they think of it like a deposition of someone who knows the documents really
Yep,
well.
that was Anna.
That was Anna,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, someone super smart said that.
Because
Um,
I
yeah,
said that to someone too, because I really like that analogy.
yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
great. So, okay, now I can give Anna credit when I quote
I'm
that.
happy that's catching on. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my like science fiction, maybe more today than I thought, idea for Fileread. That if you imagine Fileread as just a person who has all the information of the document set, you just ask it anything as many times and it won't get tired. That's great. I mean, it really opens up the door to a lot of possibilities.
Well, I'll ask you both a question. If someone was just starting with file read today, what advice would you give them? We'll start with you, Kate.
So from the lit support side, I would say make it as easy as possible for your attorneys to stumble upon it and use it, because they really need to experience it for themselves. And again, on the lit support side, I do market it as a safe chat GPT. And I don't, love to bring in another company, but people understand chat GPT and it is interchangeable with an AI chatbot. So that's worked for me. So I am using it. I'm not using it like the attorneys do. Again, that's the problem we have, is that I can bring them to Fileread, but they really need to use it themselves. But encouraging them to find it and to use it and to just go off with it. And I try to guide them if I can, but that's where they're going to find the power in this.
Thank you. Anna, what about you? Any advice for a new file read?
Yeah. So I think using it like GPT is a really good way to start because I don't know what your guys' experience is with ChatGPT, but sometimes I ask it a question and it doesn't give me exactly what I wanted. And then I'll ask it the question in a couple of different ways and I'll try to get at, "Oh, I didn't mean this, I actually meant that." Sometimes that's super helpful, sort of dialoguing with the program. And I find that the same makes sense for file read. If you feel like you're getting stuck, if you're not getting the documents that you want right away, think about phrasing and like a human, sometimes a human doesn't understand you. And you'd be surprised at what you can get when you experiment with slight variations in phrases or identify emails instead of documents, identify spreadsheet. There's different ways to get at something where you can zero in and get really close to what you need.
Yeah, and also the output. I've realized, I mean, I feel like all the AI tools I'm using at work are making me think differently, and my prompts are getting more clear. So I feel like I'm communicating more clearly, even if it's to an AI. But I'm also saying like, and give and output it in a chart and group
Yeah.
it by this type of information. So it's because a lot of times if you don't say that, it'll just give you a string of information, but you can go a step further to ask it to organize it in a certain way, and it will do that too.
I think that's so interesting what you just mentioned, Anna, about coming at the question in different ways. Because the analogy I always use is think of it like legal research. It's like I'm thinking back in the day when I would do legal research. I wouldn't just write one question. I'd try different ways to find the case I need. But really, I don't have to go that far afield to analogize because everyone's familiar with ChatGPT now. You can just describe it. Yeah, you utilize it like that. Someone told me yesterday that more people use ChatGPT than Google. I don't know if
Well,
that's true, but I trust the source. So I'm putting it out here on the webinar. This is a dangerous question to ask, I think, on this webinar, but I'm curious if you could request one dream feature in FileRead or where you'd like to see it go in the future. Where is that? So Anna, we'll start with you. Any thoughts?
yeah, I had mentioned my sort of science fiction-y idea before about file read being like a person. I would love a situation in which it can communicate to a point where it's like talking to a person. Then we can have a dialogue about what kinds of documents are in the set and how do we go about finding those together. I really like the way that the citations work. Um, I would love to see more customization. So, in the same way that you can tell ChatGPT, like, put this in a spreadsheet or
Mm.
organize this a certain way, maybe there's a way to tell FileRead, like, hey, I want these 30 deposition transcript witnesses. And just because I was just doing the task, I was thinking, like, where they worked, what dates, and then put it in a chart for basically the task you would give an assistant or your associate and see what it does, and if it can put that together, that's going to be a huge time saver.
Awesome. The good news is we're working on all of those. I even have wireframes I can show you. So, Kate, please also suggest things that we're working on.
Well, and I wanted to say too, to what Anna said, is there are other tools that do that, but having them right inside relativity
Yeah.
is great because you have a huge relativity database. You don't want to like take documents down, upload them to another platform, do the
Mm.
analysis, put the analysis back into relativity. Having it right there with all of your documents is really key. But the thing that I would like AI in general to start doing is to help me on the lit support side a little bit more. And I think this might be the whole agentic AI thing that's happening, but I would love it to help the lit support team do their job a little bit more efficiently. Like an example is pulling together a production. Like I would love to just ask whatever, create a search containing all responsive documents plus families, but not if at least one document in the family is privileged, and the documents have to have just these 3 issue codes, because it can take so long just to pull together a production. So instead
Mhm.
of the lit support team is still dependent on Boolean searching and all that, what if we can start to use some of this AI type searching to do our jobs better? And really, like I said before, just the amount of data we're getting is not sustainable. So I don't know how AI can help with this, but I'm sure someone is trying to figure this out. Like, how do we call using AI either before we even get the documents or once we get the documents, because there's just too much. So,
Yeah, you mentioned something that's a big ask for us, which is having the search work across metadata. So I could say it has this tags, this, and so that's actually coming out June 11th. So at least part of that we're working on. I think that's really important, the ability to say, I have this question, but I only want it from these custodians and
Hmm.
these tags. And so that's something that comes up a lot. I want to thank you both for the conversation, not end it yet, but turn it over to Q&A. There's a Q&A button. I have one question so far, which is will a recording be distributed? We are recording, and Emily, yes, I can send you a recording of this. But any other questions from the group? We've got another. Technical questions about Fileread. I think this is probably not the best forum for technical questions, but feel free to reach out to me separately. My email is just justin@fileread.com, and happy to answer any technical questions that people have about those. This person was an engineer, so I'm assuming they're going to be fairly technical. Um, all right, no other. I think we've done such a good job that people are without questions. Oh, we just got another one. Can you show how to efficiently switch between sites and back to file read? Yeah, I suppose we can end with a little bit of a demo. While I pull this up, feel free to add more questions to the Q&A, and I'll do a brief screen share now. I think we've done so much talking about file read, it's probably helpful to see it. All right, we'll do a quick share. So, hyperspeed. I'm showing 105,000 documents inside McKinsey opioid litigation. I'm still inside relativity. I'm now clicking into file read. We'll go to just a sample question I've already asked in a moment here where this loads. So, go to the default topic. I asked a question when I first started playing around with these documents, and that was when I get to the top here, create a fact memo about the key executives at Purdue. And file redrafts this memo. It's got John Stewart, Michael Friedman, Craig Landau, all these key executives at Purdue. And you can see here, this letter A, that's the site. And so he's the chief executive. He succeeded Michael Friedman. If I click this, it opens up within file read. I can see the documents. And if I click this eye icon here, that's what takes me back into relativity. And not only do I get to see the document within relativity, I can have the coding pane up if I want, but I can also click this file read tab and go directly to the cited portion of the document. So not just the document, but the very part within the document being relied upon by file read. So here we mentioned Michael Friedman took over for John Stewart. Here we see that site right in the email itself. So it's finding this within a 5-page email, but this becomes very helpful if you're working with a 300-page transcript, or depositions, and you really want to get right to that key part. So I got a couple other questions. All right, I think that might be it for now. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for attending. A special thank you, Anna, Kate, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your insights, and for answering questions. If anyone has other questions, I think feel free to reach out to Anna, Kate, or me. I mentioned justin@fileread.com. If you want a recording, I have it available. Emily, I'll make sure you get one. And if there's anything else we can do to help, please let me know. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you around. Bye for now.
thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.